Hey, today we will take you to the era of shadows and iron, to a time when one man's fury could level cities and his suspicion could end bloodlines. This is the story of Ivan IV, the first Tsar of all Russia, better known as Ivan the Terrible. A ruler born in blood, who ruled through fear. A man so feared that even his own guards whispered about him in silence. But behind the throne and the crown lies something darker. Tales of cruelty that echo through cathedrals, and whispers of torture that still haunt Russian folklore. And today, we will walk into that darkness, one chamber at a time. After the solemn chants faded and the incense smoke settled in the great cathedral of the Dormition, the boy stood still, his eyes distant, lips thin, posture rigid. It was January 16th, 1547. Ivan IV was only 16, but in that moment, crowned as Tsar of all Rus, he became the first ruler in Russian history to hold that title. But what the crowd saw was not a blessing, it was the ignition of a storm. His childhood had been a pit of brutality. At just 8 years old, he watched nobles murder his mother, Elena Glinskaya, believed to be poisoned by boyars, hungry for control. For years, he was tormented, starved, and ignored by the very nobles now kneeling before him. That day, as the heavy monomax cap was placed upon his head, many believed the curse of the crown had begun. Historical reference: the coronation of Ivan IV in 1547 marked the beginning of the centralized Russian autocracy. Ivan chose the title Tsar from Caesar, deliberately to signify absolute divine authority, distancing himself from the influence of boyars, Russian aristocracy. Source: Isabel de Madariaga, Ivan the Terrible, 2005, Yale University Press. That very summer, Moscow caught fire. Some said it was accidental, others whispered it was divine retribution. Tens of thousands lost their homes. Rumors spread like smoke. Ivan had unleashed hell. The Tsar, paranoid and enraged, accused the boyars of orchestrating the blaze to weaken his rule. In his wrath, he executed many without trial. Among the first victims were his childhood tormentors, those who denied him food, warmth, or affection during his early years. Some were fed to dogs, others were left to rot publicly in chains. It wasn't governance, it was vengeance dressed as justice. The winds that once whispered lullabies through the spires of the Kremlin had shifted. Now they howled like banshees through the stone corridors. In the heart of Moscow's fortress, young Ivan sat, his small frame swallowed by the shadows of an oversized throne. Only 11 years old, but his eyes had seen centuries. He clutched a wooden cross, not out of piety, but desperation. Around him, the boyars moved like wolves, elegant and perfumed, hiding their teeth behind smiles. They brought him feasts, jewels, gifts, yet spoke in hushed tones behind thick curtains. They had orphaned him with their hunger. First his father, the Grand Prince, poisoned. Then his mother, Grand Princess Elena, reduced to a coughing ghost, her death suspiciously swift. Ivan had learned to listen from the shadows. He memorized their betrayals. He studied their steps. And most of all, he waited. The boy was a scholar of cruelty, and the Kremlin was his classroom. Reference: according to historian Isabel de Madariaga, in Ivan the Terrible, 1981, Elena Glinskaya, Ivan's mother and regent, died suddenly in 1538. Many scholars and sources, including accounts from the tale of Prince Dmitri and letters of foreign diplomats, believe she was poisoned by the Shuisky and Belsky boyar factions vying for control over young Ivan. The boy knew his mother had not died of illness. He remembered her face as it turned yellow, her lips trembling as she whispered in pain. He recalled the bitter herbs she was given, herbs that smelled sweet, too sweet, from the same boyar who now dared kiss his hand. That very night, Ivan wrote the names of the boyars in a hidden ledger beneath his mattress. One by one. The boy grew, but he did not forget. He fed the pigeons each morning from the palace tower, the same pigeons that watched the same boyars dance below. One day, a pigeon flew too close, its wing caught by the wind. It plummeted into the courtyard and was trampled by a passing noble's carriage. Ivan stared for hours. Then he turned to his servant and said, "Even the birds die for being too near." A chill swept through the stone hallway. The serpent was beginning to stir. The cold of January 1570 wasn't the kind that froze hands. It was the kind that froze time. The city of Novgorod lay under a sheet of snow, still unaware that its final prayer had already been said. The bells rang as usual. Children played near the frozen Volkhov River. Monks lit incense in quiet chapels, but death was already riding from Moscow. Ivan IV, no longer just a czar, but now a prophet of vengeance, marched with his oprichniki behind him. Clad in black furs, with silver crosses clanging against their chests, they looked like monks of doom. Ivan believed Novgorod would betray him. He saw shadows of treason behind every saintly icon, every altar. And this time, he would not wait for proof. This event is historically recorded as the Massacre of Novgorod, which took place in January 1570. Cited in the Novgorod Chronicle, 15th century, eyewitnessed by Heinrich von Staden, a German mercenary in Ivan's court. Modern scholars like Isabel de Madariaga, Ivan the Terrible, Yale University Press, also confirm the campaign's brutality. Over 15,000 to 60,000 deaths, including priests, children, and nobles. The oprichniki sealed the city. No one in, no one out, and no one spared. Monks were hung from bell towers with their own ropes. Nobles were roasted alive while their children were drowned in holes cut into the river's ice. Each scream was followed by the slow toll of a cathedral bell ordered by Ivan himself. For 5 days and nights, Novgorod bled. A boy of 12 tried to run. An oprichnik grabbed him by the hair, held him above the river, and said, "Tell your angels to carry you," and dropped him. Ivan stood inside St. Sophia's cathedral, whispering verses of the Bible after every execution. His hands were red, his lips moved like a priest's, but his eyes, they were empty. On the 6th day, the Volkhov River turned a dark crimson. Bodies floated beneath the ice like ghosts trapped in glass. And yet, Ivan prayed. "I am doing God's work," he whispered. "I burn the sin to save the soul." Novgorod had become a holy graveyard, and Ivan, its grave digger prophet. By the late 1570s, Ivan wasn't just feared by his enemies, he was feared by his own blood. The oprichniki had done their work. The cities were silent, the nobles dead or obedient. And yet, Ivan still heard whispers, still saw betrayal, now in the faces of his wives, his advisors, and even his sons. The royal palace had turned into a silent tomb. Velvet curtains and golden chandeliers couldn't hide the rot inside Ivan's mind. He had married 7 times. Many of those wives disappeared, some poisoned, others sent to convents. But it was his son, Ivan Ivanovich, who would become the ultimate price of his paranoia. This horrifying event is recorded in multiple historical texts. Letters from Jerome Horsey, an English ambassador in Moscow. History of the Russian State, by Nikolai Karamzin. Also referenced in modern works like Ivan the Terrible. First Tsar of Russia by Isabel de Madariaga, Yale University Press. In 1581, Ivan struck his pregnant daughter-in-law in a rage because she wore immodest clothing. When his son, the heir to the Russian throne, confronted him, Ivan responded with a blow to the head using his iron-tipped staff. His son collapsed. For days, Ivan wept at his bedside, screaming for him to wake up. He never did. It was supposed to be a normal evening. The table was set. Roasted meats, candlelight, family. But paranoia doesn't need a reason, only a flicker. Ivan saw his daughter-in-law walk past, her dress loose, revealing too much, he thought. He shouted, cursed, called her a whore, accused her of shaming the royal bloodline. His son, Ivan Ivanovich, the strong, proud prince who had led armies, stood up and shouted, "Enough! This is your family, not your kingdom to burn." And in that moment, the Tsar's eyes glazed over. He raised his staff, iron at its tip, and with all the fury of a betrayed god, he struck his own son across the temple. Blood splashed across golden carpets. The prince collapsed. Ivan stood frozen, and then fell to his knees. My son, I killed my son." He tore his robes, screamed like an animal. For days he refused food, clutched his son's body, and begged God for one more heartbeat. But the prince never opened his eyes again. Russia had lost its future. Ivan had killed his last light. And in that darkness, he sat alone, with a crown heavier than hell itself. A man who ruled like a god, died like a ghost. Moscow had grown cold again, not because of the snow, but because the man who had once drowned cities in blood now sat trembling in his chambers. His health was failing, his spirit worse. He had no heir, no trusted friends, no queen, no son, only books, poisons, monks, and shadows. In his final days, Ivan trusted no one, not even his own doctors. He accused them of plotting to kill him and had some executed. The palace was silent again, but not with peace, with fear, because no one knew what his last command would be. Until one day, in March 1584, the silence was broken. This event is confirmed in multiple historical sources. The Diary of Jerome Horsey, Ambassador in Moscow. History of Russia by Vasily Kluchevsky. Chronicled in Russian Orthodox Church records and letters by Boris Godunov's court. Ivan was playing a chess match with one of his advisors. Witnesses say he suddenly collapsed backward in his chair, lifeless. Some say it was a stroke. Others say poison. Many believe it was divine judgment. His face turned dark blue, body rigid. He died with a smirk on his face, they say. The man who had built Russia's empire with iron and fire, now left behind a land of ashes and ghosts. It was supposed to be a quiet evening. The fire in the hearth was low. The sky outside pale and gray. Ivan sat across the chessboard, his long fingers hovering over a rook. He looked up at his opponent, a loyal courtier, and whispered, "In chess, the king dies alone." A small smile curled on his lips, and then his eyes rolled back. His body went stiff, like stone cracking in slow motion. He collapsed back, his crown falling sideways, landing on the floor with a hollow echo. Gasps filled the room. Monks rushed in with incense, but he was already gone. No screams, no blood, just silence, and a body that once belonged to a storm. As the bells tolled across Moscow, the people stayed indoors, because they knew a new nightmare was coming, the power vacuum Ivan left behind. But on that day, history whispered, The Tsar is dead. And the snow outside, for once, didn't run red. You can kill a man, but you can't bury the shadow he becomes. Ivan may have died in silence, but Russia screamed for years afterward. His reign had built the first centralized tsardom, but left it soaked in blood. He murdered his own son, destroyed noble families, and set the tone for centuries of fear-based rule. But Ivan's presence didn't die in 1584. Legends say his ghost haunted the Kremlin, wandering with a staff, whispering sins to the walls. In the years that followed, even the Romanovs and later Soviet rulers referred to him as both a curse and a necessity. He had changed Russia forever, and made sure the world would never forget him. Reference: Ivan's legacy in Russian history and culture. Multiple historical and literary sources support the shadow of Ivan's posthumous presence. The Russian chronicles, published by Chronicle Books. Documents from the time of troubles, 1598 to 1613, show how Russia collapsed into chaos after his death. Later works, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, and even Stalin referenced Ivan in political writing. His ghost was famously painted in Vasily Surikov's Ivan's Ghost. Symbolizing tyranny, Ivan became a mythic figure, the face of justified evil and the prophecy of all rulers to come. Years after Ivan's death, a boy wandered the Kremlin halls. He was a servant's child, curious, wide-eyed, playful. One night, he snuck into the forbidden wing, Ivan's old chambers. The door creaked. The air was cold. Dust clung to the air like ash, and there, by the massive throne, stood a figure, cloaked, motionless. The boy whispered, "Who are you?" The figure turned, his face shrouded in black, and replied, "I am what comes back when kings sin." The boy screamed, but when guards came, the room was empty. Yet, the scent of burnt incense lingered, and on the throne lay a single iron staff. Even in death, Ivan ruled with fear. His name still echoed in bedtime stories, his eyes still glared from paintings, and to this day, in cold Russian nights, people swear, "You don't speak Ivan's name aloud in an empty palace." He died, but what he built kept killing. Ivan's body was buried, but his shadow never was. He ruled with iron, fire, and fear, and Russia never forgot. Because after him came a century where no one ruled, only bled. The nobles turned on each other. The people starved. The throne passed from hand to hand like a poisoned gift. What followed was called Smutnoye Vremya, the time of troubles, and it was just the beginning, even 300 years later. When Joseph Stalin began his terror, he studied Ivan, quoted him, respected him. Ivan had become more than history. He had become a blueprint for tyranny. This lasting influence is documented across major historical texts. A History of Russia by Ryasanovsky. The Time of Troubles, 1598-1613, an era of famine, war, usurpation, directly linked to Ivan's legacy. Stalin openly said in 1941, Ivan was great. If he killed a few thousand, it was necessary. Source: Simon Sebag Montefiore's Stalin, Court of the Red Tsar. Ivan's methods, secret police, paranoia, false trials, were mirrored by NKVD and KGB. Even the Kremlin's architecture, military ranks, and rituals carried Ivan's DNA. The curse wasn't on the land. It was in the system he left behind. A new Tsar came, and fell, then another, and another. Russia bled in palace halls, battlefield trenches, and city squares, and behind every iron curtain, there was a ghost with a staff whispering, "Kill before you're questioned, burn before you're blamed." From the Red Square to Siberian prisons, from the gulags to the Kremlin chambers, Ivan's legacy lived on, in every silent scream, in every missing name, in every camera behind a curtain. He wasn't just the first Tsar, he was the first prototype of Russian power, and long after his bones turned to dust, the empire still ruled with his face carved into its soul.